My name's Joe, and I matched with a girl on Tinder. Her name was Angela, and she lived in a different city. She was stunning, with gorgeous eyes and a smile that lit up her entire face. We talked for hours every day, exchanging stories and laughs, and I knew I had to meet her in person. The only problem was that we didn't live in the same city. Somehow my location on the app was wrong, so I started talking to her, not realizing that we were over 4 hours away. I was planning to visit her for the weekend, and I ended up having to find an Airbnb in her city. I wanted to stay at her place, but she was nervous about having a stranger in her home, so I figured an Airbnb would be a good compromise. I respected that anyway, and I was happy to get a room somewhere. The place I found was not the nicest, to say the least. I had picked the cheapest one I could find, so I guess that's what I got. It was a house that had been divided up into rooms, with 4 rooms upstairs and 2 in the basement. The basement was what I would describe as semi-finished. The floors were bare concrete, and the ceiling was exposed pipes and vents. There was plaster on the walls, and the 2 bedrooms had decent-looking paint. My room was in the basement, and the first thing I noticed when I went down there was that there were no locks on the bedroom doors. I figured it was a safety issue, maybe for the fire code. It made me feel uneasy, though. The house was full when I arrived, with a group of German guys staying in the rooms upstairs. I talked to one of them when I first arrived, but I didn't see them much after that. I could hear them laughing and talking late into the night, though. The other person who was staying in the basement was a man, according to one of the German guys. I had never seen him before, though, but I could hear him moving around and using the bathroom a few times. I tried not to let the strange atmosphere of the place get to me, and instead focused on the excitement of meeting my online crush. We met at a cute cafe, and she was even more beautiful in person. We spent that day exploring the city and getting to know each other. But the second night, everything changed. I woke up at 3:30 in the morning, and I felt like somebody was in my room. The room was pitch dark, so I had to turn on the light on my phone to see anything. That's when I saw a man standing in my doorway, pointing his phone at me. He was taking pictures, or maybe a video, it seemed. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, and I immediately threatened to call the police. The man just giggled, then slowly walked away and went into the other bedroom in the basement. I wanted to call the cops, but I didn't think they'd be able to do anything. It would just be my word against his. He had every right to be in the house after all. I stayed up the rest of the night, my heart pounding in my chest. I was terrified, but I didn't want to leave the safety of my room. The next morning, I packed my things and left the Airbnb as quickly as I could. I stayed in a motel the next night. I never found out who that man was or what he wanted, but the experience left me shaken and haunted. In the years that followed, I tried to put the experience behind me and move on with my life. On a positive note, though, I ended up dating Angela, and we're still together to this day. It was definitely worth it to spend that night with the creeper, and because of that, Angela and I have a decent story about how we met. Much better than just that we met on Tinder. When I was in the 6th grade, we decided to book an Airbnb in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was right at the beach, and we had a large deck facing the ocean. When we first got there, we unloaded our luggage and chose bedrooms. I was 11 years old, my younger brother was 7, and my older brother was 18. We went with my mom and my dad. My younger brother and I chose the first bedroom, which was to the left of the stairs when you walked up to the 2nd story. It had bunk beds, so it was perfect for me and him. My older brother chose the room in the middle right of the hallway, because it had a queen-sized bed and a TV. My parents chose the master bedroom, which had a king-sized bed, their own bathroom, a huge closet, and a balcony. Once we were settled in, we went outside to the deck and watched the sunset in the hot tub. We then heard noises coming from upstairs, so my dad grabbed his gun that he had in his bag, and I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife. We went to investigate upstairs, and we looked around. There were 4 rooms up there, and a storage closet. There were 2 rooms as soon as you walked up the stairs, and there was a bedroom on the left and the bathroom on the right. Me and my dad went to investigate the bedroom. We checked the closet, and there were just coat hangers and an extra blanket. We checked under the bed, My dad shined the flashlight under the bed, and all we saw was a couple of wrappers from food. When we were getting up, we heard a quiet clicking sound coming from the master bedroom. When me and my dad went to go check the master bedroom, we noticed that the closet was opened by a crack. It wasn't like that when we got there. I remembered from when we put our luggage away. When my dad opened up the door, we saw the Airbnb host. He was standing in the closet, holding a knife. When he saw my dad holding the gun, he stabbed him in the arm. He got out of the closet and he didn't see me, so I cut him pretty deep in the back. He fell to the ground and my dad pinned him pretty easily. My dad was 6'2" and 220 pounds. While my dad was holding the guy, he told me to call the cops, so I did, and they were there in under 10 minutes. My dad required 13 stitches in his arm, and the Airbnb host is serving 20 years for attempted murder. To the Airbnb host, I hope you rot in hell. We haven't used Airbnb since, and now we just book hotels instead. I'm Brent, and a few years ago, I went on vacation with my friends Lyle, Devin, and Darren. We had all just graduated from college, and we needed to let loose and forget about the stress of the real world for a little while. I was tasked with planning the details of the trip, because they all said that I was the best at that. I can't help but feel that they were just lazy, but I don't care. I did it anyway. We used Airbnb to find a place to stay. At first we were thinking of getting a luxury condo or a penthouse, but after an hour of searching, something else caught my eye. It was a fairly remote cabin, and it was very rustic looking. Some would say run down, but I loved it more and more as I scrolled through the pictures. When the time came, we set off. It was around a 3-hour drive, and there was no car access to the cabin. We would have to park the car and hike in. It was only about a 30-minute hike, so no big deal. That actually added to the experience for me. The cabin was perfect, cozy and remote with beautiful views of the surrounding nature. It was exactly what we needed. There were only 2 bedrooms. One had bunk beds, and the other had a queen-sized bed. We did rock, paper, scissors for the big bed. Darren won, so me and the others went to our room to settle in. Darren gloated a bit, and then strutted into the master bedroom. We spent the first day hiking and exploring the area, but it wasn't all peace and quiet. On the second night, strange things began to happen. We would hear some strange noises coming from outside, like someone was walking around the cabin. We brushed it off as animals, but the more it happened, the more uneasy we became. We eventually fell asleep, but I was awoken by a loud noise coming from the kitchen. I was sure there was an intruder. I got out of bed to investigate, and that's when I saw him. A tall figure, dressed in all black. He was rummaging through one of our cabinets. He wasn't even trying to be quiet. I woke up my friends, and we quickly realized that we were being burglarized. We didn't know what to do. We were in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone service, and the intruder was still inside the cabin. We all huddled in my room trying to come up with a plan. We started searching the room for anything that could be used as a weapon. I found an old fishing rod in the closet, and one of the other guys found a frying pan. Armed with our makeshift weapons, we slowly made our way back to the living room where we'd seen the intruder. That's when things got really strange. The intruder was gone, but we didn't even hear him leave. Maybe we were so scared that we didn't notice. We felt relieved initially, because it seemed that nothing was stolen. We all had our things in the bedrooms, and he never even went in there. But then I realized something. I had left the car keys on the kitchen counter. I went over to check, and they were gone. The intruder must have taken them. Like I said before, the car was only a 30-minute walk, but that guy had a head start on us, and if we made it there in the dark, what good would it do without the keys? We were terrified. We had no way of calling for help, and no way of knowing if the intruder was still nearby. We decided to stay in the cabin for the night, and the next day, we walked to the spot where we parked the car. Sure enough, it was gone. We kept walking along the road trying to find civilization, but it felt like we were getting nowhere. We were running low on food and water, and we were all worried that we'd run into our tormentor. It was then that we heard the sound of a car engine in the distance. We were nervous, but we ran towards the sound. We flagged down the car, and the driver was kind enough to call the police. They arrived soon after, and we told them about the break-in at the cabin. They searched the area, and finally found our car abandoned at the side of the road several miles away. They never found the guy who stole it, though. We were told by the police that there have been some similar break-ins in the area. The strange part is that he didn't seem to go for valuables or money. It was more about the thrill, it seemed, like it was a game to him. Something about stranding a group of guys in a cabin in the middle of the night was funny to him. It makes me wonder if he was watching us while we were walking down the road, admiring his work. It was a relief to finally be safe, but the experience left us all shaken. We had never felt so vulnerable and scared. I'll never forget that trip or the fear that I felt, but I also won't forget the bond that my friends and I formed as we worked together to survive. I'm a 45-year-old guy, and this happened about 5 years ago. I was living a quiet life in a small town in Maine. My house was my pride and joy, a 2-story colonial with wraparound porch and white picket fence. I had been living there for a few years at the time, and I loved the peace and solitude. When I first bought the house, it was a little more than I could afford. My plan from the beginning was to rent out a room or two on Airbnb. Shortly after I moved in, I set up my profile and started renting out one of my bedrooms. I had many guests for the first year, and they were all good experiences for the most part. Very few problems. That was until one person. He was a young man named Jack. He seemed nice enough at first, so I welcomed him into my home. Everything was fine for a while. Jack was quiet and kept to himself. It was like free money. One day, I went into Jack's room to do some cleaning, and that's when I noticed that there was something on the wall. It looked like a little black dot. I inspected it closer and found that it was a tiny pinhole camera. It had been installed in the corner near the ceiling. I was shocked. How could he have done that without my knowing? And what was he doing with all the footage he was capturing? It was his room, but he had no right to drill a hole into my wall, not to mention how creepy it seemed. I confronted Jack about the camera, and he had the audacity to say that he installed it for his own protection. He said that he was worried about my strange behavior, and that he needed to keep an eye on me. I was incensed. How could he even suggest such a thing? I told him to pack his bags and get out of my house immediately. Over the next few days, I felt like I was being watched. I felt like my privacy had been violated, and I was afraid Jack might have been recording more than I found. I searched the entire house, but found nothing. Over time, the feeling of paranoia subsided. I moved on with my life and even continued to rent out the room for a few years. Eventually, I stopped doing Airbnb, not because of any horrible experience, but simply because I didn't need the money anymore. A few years went by, and I had long since put the whole ordeal behind me. But then one day, I received an email from a strange address. Normally, I just delete things like that, but this one had a subject line that caught my attention. It said, "Spy cam footage. Thought you might want to see." I opened the email, and all it had was a download link. I immediately remembered Jack and the creepy experience from back then. I didn't want to click it, but I couldn't help myself. I downloaded an MP4 file and watched in horror as the footage from the camera played out before me. I saw myself walking around the house, walking into the front door, and even fast asleep in the middle of the night. It was a compilation of what seemed like an average day in my life. I could tell that it was from years ago, because I'm bald now and I had hair in the video. It seemed obvious that it was Jack. My paranoia kicked in again, and I started searching my house for secret cameras. I used the video to track down where the camera must have been. Eventually, I found a small hole in my bedroom that seemed to have been filled. That must have been where the camera had been installed. Jack must have taken them when he left. I still can't explain his motives, and why would he wait all these years to show it to me? It was clearly a sick joke, but why would he wait so long to show what he'd done? I spent a few days alone in the house with an actual psychopath, and in some ways, I consider myself lucky that it wasn't worse.